What's up, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys some of the small tricks that I like to use in my productions, as well as the mixing, staging, or arrangement, or adding some cool effect to keep a track more groovy and also more interesting. So I'm going to use a project that I did for remix from Tok Tok and Mahalo. I guess I pronounce this pretty well. I hope so. And it's a track called This Town, which is I've remixed. Uh, Pretty much the original one is most likely in a deep house way, so I kind of flip it in the EDM, which is my own signature genre. As you can see, Studio One is my DAW, and I separate my arrangement into two parts, which is the original part and my part, which is the original part has consist only um, the original part that included the vocals and piano that I use um, in the break, and I didn't messing around with the mix as well, just basically just a low filter, something like that. And then my part, which is basically again the drop and some ambiances and respace that I use on the track. So I'm going to play the original part, which is the drop part, and yeah, here we go. So yeah, that's basically the main part of the drop. So I'm going to explain you guys the small trick that I did. Especially the reverb is also really interesting. So I like to work with the A and B sections, which is some kind of call and answers type kind of feelings. And it consists of two layers, which is the first sounds it made by Serum. Which basically I choose some preset and to over tweak the sound out of it, and it comes kind of like really chainsaw slash elephant sounds. So, and you can see my CPU is kind of like effed up because of my screen uh, recording. And then the second sound, and basically just layering to get a little bit like the low mid frequencies that I was looking for. And basically through the serum on the A sections, which is the lead A1, I edited some pitch bend. If you look at the pitch bend right here, I just use 4 notes up and 4 notes down, which is not fully semitone. By mean by that is not 12 semitone or 24 semitones, just basically the small pitching. But if you can see, I didn't pitch that really high, just small amount of it, so it gives a little bit that kind of the pitch bend that I was looking for. If I just mute it, which just sounds pretty cool, but it doesn't really that add up the vibes that I was looking for on the sound. So I just added a pitch bend, really subtle, and you get this. It's really subtle, but it's really makes sense for the track. And that all included with the reverb. If you can see from here, let me see, I just contest to do 1/4. I add some automations, which is kind of weird actually. So I really like to have some kind of chainsaw reverb effects get along with the dry signals. Because of that, I get really that interesting way to create some depth on the sounds. So probably going to solo only the reverb, so you get this kind of gatey sounds. And then let me see. And get along with that, it sounds like this. Which sounds pretty cool. And the B sections, you can see I separated the reverb buses of the leads, which is the lead A reverb and lead B reverb. Mean by that is I get cleaner sounding leads. So if you must look at this, the B section is probably like from here, and you can see from the automation it mutes down. So if I just play this and then to the mute, and then goes up to the next phrase, which is the B sections, which is kind of like big groovy sounds. Yeah, my Avenger doesn't want to work with me in this case. So basically it's from Avenger. It's basically like a big saw and adding some of the detuning. So that's basically the B sections. And the really cool thing is also on the reverb as well. So if you look at this, there's a thing about the spectral sidechaining. So most of you guys know what the sidechaining means. Basically, you use that to create some room between the kick and the bass and the sub. But spectral sidechaining is kind of special. It's basically having more room, space between the vocal leads on a dynamic way. For me, it's to prevent some over tweak automations. You can also do that, like a really subtle automations, but I like to use it automatically. So track spacer is the one way to go. If you can see from here, I just triggered from 220 Hz to 3500, which is basically 220 Hz is the crossover of the frequencies on the key A, which is the key that I'm working with, which is the A minor. And I just trigger only the mid range, and you can see it's really ratio 22%, so really parallel, and it creates the room on the mid range on the reverb, so it has to be feels that you kind of hug with someone. So then you have a more cleaner reverb. And then let's just mute the B sections without it. And then with it. Yes, so you create that some kind of space between the dry signal of the leads and also the reverb. And you can apply that to sidechain the kick and the bass. It sounds really transparent, and I encourage you guys to buy track spacer. It is one way to go to have more spectral sidechaining, and it's not really that expensive, so you can also use that. And the thing what I like to talk about also is the spectral sidechaining with track spacer can also apply it between the leads and the vocal to have more space between the vocals, apparently. So if you can see, I have the vocal effects played alongside with the drop. So which is basically this loop. And then let me see. So I applied that vocal in the leads as the trigger of my track spacer on the lead bus. So as you can see, track spacer again, pretty much high, 32%, and I sidechain it basically through the vocals. So in order to do that, sidechain mode is one way to go, and it's really subtle if I just play alongside with the loop vocal, but it really gives that sense of dynamic groovement, even though the volume of the vocal effects underneath the leads drop is pretty much high, low, on the low volume. So again, just trigger on the mid range only. So I'm playing it first without it. And then with it. So yeah, I hope you guys hear the difference, but it really makes sense of a dynamic when the loops on the vocal play, so it has a little bit more rooms between those frequencies. Maybe I'm going to talk about the kick as well, some of the tricks that I like to use as well. Let me see. Pretty much punchy kick is basically the kick that I also use on the track Show Me, which is a collaboration with Mero. Pretty much punchy kick. The way to do this, I use Neutron 3 as my transient designer, and the way one way to go is basically the parallel mode. So you can see here the Neutron, I split banded the mid range and the top, and give a more sense of attack more on the top, which is the sparkle one, and a bit more less sustain and more attack on the mid range on the kick. So basically why I'm turning down the sustain, because I need to have kind of more less sustain on the mid on the kick to have more room for the leads on the really subtle way. And basically because I do it parallel, so I blend it still 70/30 in this case. So still 70% the dry signal, and the wet signal, and underneath that I just blend it with the dry. So then you have kind of the sense of transients on the kick. And if I just mute it, so it still has that kind of a ticky sounds that I was looking for. And then to the second drop, if you didn't hear the second drop one, which sounds like this. Let me see. So again, a little bit different leads, which is basically consists one sound, and it sounds like this. This sounds kind of like a talk box or something like that. Let me see. I use basically cut the frequencies again because it's only for the effect's sake, and I add some flangers. So basically the real sound is basically pretty much kind of like acid, but also really dark somehow. and it's also pending, which is pretty cool. So, and then I add the flanger. And I like to use that to create some kind of weird effects, and it also sounds a bit much better than phaser. And then to the slick EQ 12.5 kilohertz and push it a lot, like 12 dB. And this is a free plugin that you also can download it, so to give that brightness that I like. So and then also let me see through the vocal. And the leads, basically, if you can see on the second drop, from the track spacer, I push the ratio more on those certain frequencies, because I've this kind of fully focus on the ad-libs and also on the main lead of the vocal, so I don't want to mess around with that lead, so the vocal has to be more upfront, and still, yeah, it has that kind of like weedy sound behind of it. So I hope I can show you guys what I mean by that, in hope that my CPU doesn't F me up. So let me see, to the track spacer. Oh, that's shape box. And then you can see from here. This town, 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 and then with it. This town, 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 this town. So there you have it. So that's the one way to go to use spectral sidechaining. It's also one of my biggest tricks to apply it in your production as well. So I hope you guys learned from it. And I'm sorry for the CPU because of the OBS recordings. But anyway, I hope you guys learn from it, and take care.